Yes, hello everyone. Welcome to WD18, the Watford fan channel. Welcome to a Chris Wilder special. We're talking all things about the new Hornets head coach this evening with Charlie Zazzera, the main man, and a couple of special guests who we'll get onto in just a moment. Charlie, mate, how you getting on? Have you calmed down after the events of Watford Football Club? There is never a dull day as there being a Watford fan.
Yeah, it was a mad Monday. I think even today we've had some bizarre news, haven't we? But yeah, what did you tweet today? Just one normal day. That's all you asked.
One regular day of Watford Football Club is all I ask for, but will never happen. Thank you to everyone who's watching at the moment. Make sure you do leave your thoughts in the live chat below. We're going to be talking about Chris Wilder and getting the insight on Chris and his time at both Sheffield United and Middlesbrough, and a bit before that as well. The new gaffer's in. Charlie, bit of an exclusive. He did speak to the man himself yesterday. Number one, how did that come about? And number two, from the conversation you had with him, what are you allowed to say?
Yeah, no, I just sent him a message on when he appointed Monday night saying, "Welcome to the best club in the world. All the fans behind you, good to have you." And he just messaged back saying, "Thanks, appreciate the kind words. You about tomorrow? I'll give you a quick ring." And yeah, just had a pretty casual chat, not too much football stuff. Just talk about where he's staying, how he's feeling, and he just seems kind of excited. He sees it as a big opportunity. He's really excited to work with the players that he's got, and he sees it as a good opportunity for himself. And he kind of spoke about the fans and how he's excited to get behind them and get down the Vic. So all positive. So hopefully QPR are going to see a positive performance.
Touch wood, because you met him earlier on in the season, and he was kind of reveling about the attacking talent we have in the squad, and he's going to get the chance to work with him. I think he mentioned about Pedro Sarr when he was the Middlesbrough manager, didn't he? About something to do with the quality that we got at Watford. So I imagine he's pretty excited.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our squad, it's stacked. I mean, the two guys that we're going to have coming, they're doing a lot better than us this season. We've probably got better players on paper, but let's hope Chris can get the best out of them.
For sure. And that tees up the two guests nicely. We're delighted to be joined by Ollie from the Sheffield United Way and Tom Green from the Boro Breakdown. Welcome, lads. How's it going? Ollie, I'll just cross over to you first, mate. As a Chris Wilder lover, I mean, what he did at your club was unbelievable. What was just first off, what was your initial reaction when you saw that he was coming to Watford? Did it surprise you?
Yeah, it did. It caught me off guard, to be honest, because I think I wasn't fully expecting Bilic to leave. So then obviously seeing Wilder having already been lined up and coming in very quickly did shock me a little bit. And I think for me, I'm a little bit excited for him. You know, I was with Charlie earlier in the year when we met him. He's just really nice guy as well. Really great to meet him. Obviously, after what he did at United, just really want to see him go and be successful, to be honest. But that was before the second fear kicked in. That was, what if we have to play them at Wembley? And so, there's a balance to how excited I'm allowing to let myself be.
Imagine Chris Wilder versus Sheffield United at Wembley. I said it before we went on air. I think Sheffield United will just be okay, but that would be a great script. Tom, to bring you in, mate. How are you guys feeling about this one? Did you expect Chris to get another job this season after starting the season at Boro?
Well, I mean, we're also not looking forward to potentially playing him at Wembley, and you've got the added kind of bonus of Britt Assombalonga playing for you guys as well. So there's that kind of narrative as well. But I think we did expect him to get another job. It's what he did at Boro was good for about half of it and bad for the second half, but it doesn't exactly overwrite everything that he did at Sheffield United. And I was a little bit shocked he was at Watford because I had been kind of seeing things about him lining up for the Aberdeen job. And, I saw that and I was like, yeah, I can see that. I can see him doing well there. Personally, I was surprised that Bilic wasn't sacked sooner. That was after we played you guys at the Riverside. That wasn't a particularly good performance for you. I might be understating it there. I don't know what you have said previously, but no, I thought looking at that. I mean, we've got a Watford fan in our Telegram chat, the podcast Telegram chat, and he's always kind of like going on saying we just look poorly coached, and that really kind of like summed it up at the Riverside. So, if anything, I thought he'd have been gone sooner. So for it all to happen kind of within 20 minutes the other day. I mean, shouldn't be too surprised because it did happen to us with Warnock and Wilder. But I think the main surprise was that Bilic wasn't gone sooner. But definitely didn't see Wilder going in at Watford.
Yeah, it's really interesting to get that outside perspective. Charlie, before I come to you just about his career before the clubs that these two guys, Ollie, just your thoughts, mate, on Watford this season. We were just mentioning off air about the game at Bramall Lane. Wasn't a spectacle, one that will be forgotten pretty quickly from a Watford point of view anyway. But I don't know how much you've been seeing of us this season, but from an outside point of view, what have you made of us this season?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting one because obviously we played your first game of the season. We were one of the unlucky few who got to play against Sarr, Pedro and Dennis as they were rated, shall we say, at the start of the year. And from that point on, I really sort of expected you to kick on, but it's just not gone that way. So for me, I think it's the injuries that seem to have really taken it out of your season because obviously keeping Pedro fit would have been huge. I think when I sort of spoke to Charlie earlier in the year, we were talking about, Pedro and Njai is a little bit of a joke for who's the best player in the division. And so having him out for so long has such a massive impact that from the outside, from my perspective, it's been a lot about how the injuries have just gutted you. And so battling through that and coming to this stage of the season when you were expected to kick on, that hasn't happened. I can see why Bilic left. And my second point is that I love Hamza Chowdhury, and I think he's my favourite player in the league.
What was it about Hamza that you like? Because to be fair, he was our best player at the game away this season. But what was it particularly about him that you like?
So we played him when he was at Leicester in the Premier League. And honestly, that first season in the Premier League, he was the player who most stood out for his dominance over midfield. So with the ball, admittedly, he's not doing loads. But in terms of breaking down attacks, it felt as though you have to have two players so that you can just try and knock him out of the game. Because if he's anywhere near the ball, he's going to get it. And I think that's a real standout. And I think speaking before, I heard that you might have got some kind of buy clause in the summer. But if not, I have been... talking on our channel about trying to think United can hijack that one.
A little bit of tapping up. To be fair, I think the clause is 6 million, Charlie, if I'm correct. I think the Athletic said it was £6 million for Hamza Chowdhury. As you mentioned, we're going to be talking all things Chris Wilder today. Obviously, the new Watford head coach, as the guys mentioned, it took 17 minutes for Bilic to be leaving the club and Chris Wilder to be coming in. One that I didn't expect, as the guys mentioned as well. But Charlie, from your perspective, we mentioned it on the last stream. You know Chris, you met Chris before. Just for people who don't know, and before he went to Sheffield United and Boro, could you maybe just give a bit of an insight into his career before those two clubs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite an important because you just think of him as Sheffield United. And as mentioned in the last video, for the last firm I worked with for the sack race, we actually gave him Manager of the Decade from 2010 to 2020. And that started in non-league. His first managerial job was at Telford Town, where he won 4 trophies in, I think, 27 weeks. He then went to Halifax. That's where he finished playing. They went into liquidation, unfortunately. But then he got the Oxford job, who at the time Oxford were also in non-league. And then in his first full season at Oxford, he took them up via the playoffs. In the playoffs, the non-league playoffs were Luton, Russian and Diamonds, and York City, and they beat York City. Stabilised Oxford, kept him in League Two for a couple of seasons, I think 3 seasons, and then he went for the Northampton job, kept them up from League Two. And then a couple of seasons later, he won the League Two title. So I'll let Ollie kind of move on from Sheffield United, but he's got a lot of coaching experience. He's come across a lot of kind of adversity. He's done a lot of hours on the grass, so we've got a coach who's pretty experienced. And everything I've gone through, I haven't even touched on Sheffield United, where he's had his best moments, really.
Ollie, got to bring you in there, mate. I mean, how is he kind of looked at by Sheffield United fans? Is he really like a bit of a legend there, really?
Oh, massive. Absolutely a massive legend at United. The impact he had on the club to where he came in. So I think, it's easy to forget that we'd had 5 years in League One at the point that Wilder came to United. We'd just had Nigel Adkins, and I think we'd finished 11th in League One with a really, really poor season. Booed off at the end of the last season. Chance of you're not fit to wear the shirt. Like a walk of dishonour, I think we'll call it, that they did after that last game. So when Wilder comes in, it's not a happy camp. He's got a lot of work on. His first thing he did was give Billy Sharp the captain's armband, which obviously put 2 United legends together, really. And from there, it wasn't all plain sailing. We didn't actually start particularly well. 5 really poor games to start his reign at United. And it all culminated in this performance at Millwall, where we'd given away a stupid penalty in the last minute. For no reason, someone had jumped up and just punched it. Just, as you do in your own box in the last minute when you get the 0-0 draw away at Millwall. Fun times. But he took them out. And on the way home, he stopped the coach. He got Billy Sharp to go and buy beers for the coach home. And they had this really open and frank chat on the coach about what were going wrong, what did they need to do to create it better. And from that point onwards, I think, so 5 games in, I think we got 1 point. We finished that season on 100. So we got 99 from his next 41 games. That was where we developed overlapping centre-halves, where we really decided that we were going at League One. And we just continued it from there. And I think most of us expected that we'd be in the Championship and we'd probably look to stabilise. Season 1, we were top of the league in November when Coots breaks his leg and we have to rejiggle. We then sign Norwood and get promoted and then go on in the Premier League on this unbelievable run, obviously culminating in us finishing 9th. I still maintain that if we didn't have lockdown and COVID, maybe we would have gone better than 9th. Maybe he would still be with us now and we'd be an established team in the Premier League, because that's what it looked like. But the lack of fans really took the legs out from us. That break for COVID really killed us. And unfortunately, it culminated in him leaving us a bit of a cloud, really, with how it ended. But that doesn't take anything away from how much of a legend he is at United, how great the time that we had with him was, and how innovative it was. I've never in my entire life known Sheffield United be talked about in national media as an innovative team. Like, whenever we've done anything good, people still think that we're the Dave Bassett cloggers that got to the Premier League. Oh, they just oof it and they kick everybody. We've always been talked about as that. And so to have him actually, football athletic podcasts doing overlapping centre-halves, how does it work? It felt quite nice to be fashionable. And he made us into so much more than what we'd been for the last 5 years in League One that, really special times.
Amazing. So, Tom, before I bring you in, Ollie, just wanted to kind of just drill in a little bit on the style of play there. So you mentioned the overlapping centre-backs. What would you say to someone who's never watched the Chris Wilder team before, the key principles, maybe not that we expect, but from what you saw from his Sheffield United team?
And Ollie, Ollie, can I just ask as well? I've read that he was playing this kind of style in League Two in Northampton. Was he playing this in League One?
Yeah, so we started, when we were looking at the overlaps and when we were looking at our system, so what does the United system look like, as it were, when we had Chris Wilder? Now, the focus was around overlapping centre-halves. That's what people have heard as the buzzwords. What that meant was we played 5 at the back. We had 2 wing-backs on either side who would go forwards and who were entirely tasked with getting forwards. We would then have our 2 side centre-halves who, generally speaking, were Jack O'Connell and Chris Basham, and they would go around the outside to create an overload, both on right and left side. And then we had a floating number 10 who would join both sides to create this extra overload. We were all about trying to get 3-on-2 against a right back and a centre back down the wing. And we did that because what we found is that teams were just sitting in. So in League One, Sheffield United were at that time one of the bigger teams, and therefore teams sat in and waited and they'd hit you on the break. So he wanted to find a way to break that down. And the way he did it was in this overlapping centre-half system. And it was all the way from League One to the Premier League that eventually carried us, because it was so different. But I would say that I don't think at the minute Watford have got the squad for overlapping centre-halves as I've described it there. But what you have got is the makings of a way of getting overlaps in those positions where he's going to be key. What he's going to want to do is get Pedro in a floating role to help you develop an overlap or a overload on either right or left. He's probably going to have wingers, I assume, because obviously you've got Sarr, you've got Sema. You're going to want to have an impact with those wingers. And he'll probably also have 2 up front, because that's what he always liked. He likes a partnership up front. And I think what that'll do is you'll see a lot of attacking commitment and you'll see a lot of trying to isolate defenders so that you've got extra space for that final delivery.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Now, looking at actually the whole spell he had at Sheffield United, this is where I'm going to bring in Tom here. So Sheffield United average points per game over 227 games was 1.59. And Middlesbrough, granted only 45 matches, was 1.49. Now, Tom, from your perspective, how do you look back on Chris Wilder's time at Middlesbrough? How would you say the fans look back on it, and in terms of just the overall consensus?
I think personally, I'm jealous of what Ollie's just described there of their journey from League One, because it definitely, the way it started off, we thought it was going to go that way. He'd came in, after we had Neil Warnock, who I think we can all agree plays a very specific style of football, and is great when you're firefighting to keep the team up, like he was when he came in for Woodgate for us. But I think when you kind of reach a certain point and you're trying to develop, it might kind of fall off a little bit. And that's what we had. We felt we had a team that was technically better than the football that Warnock was asking them to play. So Wilder came in, he brought his formation with him, 5 at the back. We had Anthony Dijksteel and Paddy McNair as the overlapping centre backs. We had wing backs. He got Isaiah Jones playing right wing back, and he was doing fantastically well, to the point where, we had Jed Spence out on loan last season as well. And there was a big debate in our fan base of against Nottingham Forest fan base as well, of who's actually better, Jones or Spence, because, Jones started as a left winger that season and then eventually ended up playing right wing back. But yeah, then you had the midfield three of Howson, Tavernier and Crooks. The Dijksteel, Jones, Crooks connection down that right-hand side was absolutely quality. And I just remember there was one game where we played Forest at the Riverside and we absolutely battered them. I think we won, I think it was 2-0, but they never looked likely to score, and we just kind of outplayed them all game. And we were just thinking, as we head into January, this is going to be it for the rest of the season. We're going up here. January comes, we sign Aaron Connolly, Riley McGree, Flo Balogun, who's obviously absolutely ripping it up in the French league at the moment. Again, we're really positive after that. And then it reaches a point at the start of March, I think it was, where he gets linked to the Burnley job. And that's where it all started going downhill. Coincidentally, today, Michael Carrick was asked about links to the West Ham job, which I thought was perfect timing considering we were recording this tonight. And he's kind of come out straight away, said, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm happy at Middlesbrough. Why would I want to leave? I think if that's what Wilder had said last year, we wouldn't have had so many issues. But that really seemed like where all the problems started. We never seemed like the same team after that. I think it was an international break last year, came back and we absolutely walloped Peterborough away. And then it was downhill from there. We thought it was bad form going into that international break. Then that one game back, we're thinking, right, we're back to where we were now. And then it was downhill slide again. And we missed out on the playoffs on the last day of the season against Preston. During the summer, he was kind of hyping up these kind of real marquee signings he's saying. He was, I think it's no secret that he was after kind of a really big name striker. So big name that I think we've forgotten his name, but he ended up going from Groningen to some team in Spain and hasn't done that well. But we were being quoted like 11 or 12 million for him. And Middlesbrough over the last couple of years has kind of really changed in terms of the dynamic of what we're trying to be as a club. We're trying to kind of copy more of that Brentford, Brighton model, sign younger players and sell them on for profit. We sold Jed Spence on for profit in the summer. And, we didn't expect to be selling Tav as fans, but we sold him kind of on the eve of the season. But yeah, Wilder was really kind of hyping up these marquee signings, and it did seem like there was a bit of a disconnect between him and our director of football model. We signed Marcus Forss from Brentford, who has been accomplished in the Championship previously. Scored for Brentford. He played on loan for Hull last season, I believe. And we signed a lad called Matthew Hoppy from Mallorca, I believe it was. And Wilder was pretty much refusing to play them at the start of the season, calling them kind of development strikers and stuff, which for Hoppy we can understand. He's 20 or 21, never played in the English game before. He's done all right in Germany and Spain. But yeah, he'd never played here before and is still quite young. Marcus Forss was a little bit more difficult to understand. And then start of this season, it started slowly, and I think the overall view from any Sheffield United fan I spoke to at that point was Wilder always starts slowly, so don't worry too much about it. You'll pick up after a few games or so, but it gets to 5 games and we still haven't really picked up. It gets to, I think we'd only beat Swansea and Sunderland by the time he'd left, and Sunderland could have gone either way. That would have been a game we hated to lose as well at the Riverside. But you look at some of the games we were losing, and I vividly remember the last game. It was against Coventry. Gyökeres scored, and in that game, Chris Wilder had blamed 8 individual mistakes from players on the lead up to that goal. I remember talking about it on our podcast afterwards, and I was saying you can't blame 8 individual mistakes. I think if it's 1 or 2, then fine. If it's 8, that's to do with the coaching. And it's strange because our underlying numbers were actually all right at the start of this season in terms of XG against, XG for, but we just weren't. It just wasn't happening for us, and there were rumours around that time of kind of like discontent. And it just seemed to really kind of carry over onto the pitch as well. So I feel like if we played Watford in the playoffs, he would get a bit of a frosty reception from our fans, for sure. I mean, Britt might as well, to be fair. But yeah, it really seemed like it was going to be good. And then those job links kind of really threw us off course. It actually started again at the start of this season with Bournemouth, and again he was kind of refusing to rule that out. Really, he was just kind of saying you don't need to ask me about that, same as he did with Burnley. It was just kind of really strange behaviour, I think, considering what Carrick's done today, just come out and flatly deny it straight away. It did seem like he was kind of inviting it at times, and like I said, there were rumours that he didn't want to kind of work with the director of football system that we had, which, as I understand it, was similar towards the end of Sheffield United. Ollie might be able to kind of speak more on that. But yeah, I remember, I mean, there's 2 sides to every story, obviously, but I remember listening to an interview with Sheffield United's owner, and that was what he was saying. I've also listened to an interview with Wilder, and he was kind of saying the opposite. So who knows? But I just remember that was kind of rumoured at the time, and it was interesting to me when I realised today that he's came into Watford as a head coach because he was a manager at Middlesbrough, which I think Warnock was as well, to be fair. But the whole system we're trying to use at the moment, it did start with Woodgate a few years ago, and he was head coach. So I feel like those 2 possibly came in wanting to be manager and not head coach.
Tom, just on the start that Wilder had, I think he won 7 of his first 11 games, which Watford fans are thinking if he does for the end of the season, we're going to be in the playoffs. But what Ollie said about kind of Watford might not have the players to be able to play his system that Ollie's described, that kind of innovative system that's gone famous. Did he, from the ground running, manage to come in and put his principles on the team? And did you have the players to do that? And at the start, did he manage to make an impact straight away?
I would say so, yeah. Like I say, he did have to repurpose some players. Isaiah Jones moved from left wing over to right wing back. We have Duncan Watmore, who was more of an attacking midfielder, would occasionally get used as kind of like a winger or a striker. He was always a striker, playing with Andres Pereira at the time under Wilder. One player I thought was going to fit in absolutely perfectly to this system was Paddy McNair, who isn't quite a defender, isn't quite a midfielder. So we thought, great, overlapping centre-back. He was played on the left-hand side, and to be fair, he got found out quite a few times being on that left-hand side of the defensive three last season. But we did already have the players there. But just like I said, some had to be repurposed into other positions. But it worked well. Like I say, I think especially that right-hand side with Dijksteel playing as the right-sided centre-back, Matt Crooks on the right side of centre midfield, and Isaiah Jones on the wing, linked up perfectly together. And I think in terms of the principles that we saw, we definitely saw pressing starting from the front, but also the right centre mid and the left centre mid which would have been Crooks and Tavernier at the time, both joining in with that press, and that seemed pretty instant. I mean, as I remember it, he did take over with, I think, on the eve of an international break, so we did have a couple of weeks to work with the team. But yeah, I thought, couldn't fault the start really. Like I say, there were some players who didn't exactly fit. I think we still had Sol Bamba and Lee Peltier left over from the Warnock transfer window at that point. And to be fair to both of them, they played a big part in the dressing room and when needed towards the end of the season. Sol Bamba had the greatest touch map ever when we played United at Old Trafford, for example. But yeah, they did fit in when Wilder needed them to. So I think if you've got players who can be flexible, he can work with them.
Great insight. Really good insight. I wanted to throw this question over to you, Ollie, just to get involved here from Sean. Does Wilder really have enough time to implement this style of play when he only has a few games to the end of the season? So it's 11 games left. He's got a deal until the end of the season. He knows what he has to do, but obviously time will tell. But in your gut feeling, Ollie, do you think it's enough time?
My gut tells me I think this will be successful. I think he's got enough time that he will have a real impact. I think you've got the players there that will really, especially those attacking players, will really be able to deliver what he wants out of your attacking players. I think he's got the bones of a squad that can really do what he wants. He's going to change it a little bit, I'm sure, because like I say, I don't believe there's the defence there for the overlapping centre-back system. But I think you make up for it by having what United never had. In all the time he was with us, we never had wingers who were fast. He tried to sign some, he wanted some, but never got them, and so couldn't deliver. So I think we'll see a different system to what he used at United with those same principles of creating the overloads, of making sure that you get 2-on-1 situations for quality into the box. And I think he will have time to implement that. I think, for me, my initial reaction to it is that for managing your squad for what I would probably predict to be 14 games, he is the perfect man to come in and do that. Where I would have more concerns is if he's staying over the summer and building a squad for next year, because that's a very different question. And as Tom alluded to, that's where things went a little bit wrong for him at Boro, and I think in the end at United. But I think for now, for the immediate, yes, he can do it.
I love that. I love the positive. Charlie, I wanted to bring you in just on the lineup. So Ollie mentioned about how he would use the wingers, and it might cut your face off here, lads. But we've got kind of like the team that Charlie would go with in the system, and you see the three at the back and the two wing backs. Charlie, do you want to just talk through why you've gone for this lineup? Who you think could excel, and who you think could really benefit from this from these tactics?
Yeah, that graphic's doing a favour cutting me out, so sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I mean, looking at it, I think two positions that I kind of wanted to ask Ollie and Tom. I think the three centre backs pick themselves. I think Ollie might have a point in terms of Wesley Hoot being overlapping Jacob. I think we've seen Porteous likes go on an adventure, and I think he could definitely do that. We've got quite a few wing backs really. We've got Sema, Kamara who can play that position. Ferreira's coming back. I think especially Isaiah Jones, what he did last season under Wilder was brilliant. And then the two positions that I was interested in asking, I'll ask Ollie first, but the number 6, Imran Louza, who's really, really great technically, can pick a pass. How key was Ollie Norwood for Sheffield United and in Wilder's system? Because in my head, that's how I feel Louza's going to play for him and kind of be that quarterback and dictate play.
It's everything. It was absolutely everything, honestly. If I just sort of break down what that role looked like for United. In our first season in League One, we had Paul Coots played it, and he was really key in sort of being able to just drop in, pick up the ball when somebody's under pressure, find that little bit of space, and then play you forward. So he's always looking to sort of get you moving, and then obviously try and play those big switches and just get you that space where you can start to really go and attack. When we came up to the Championship, as I referenced before, we were top of the league in about, I think it was early November. In the game where we went top of the league, Paul Coots broke his leg and was out for the rest of the season. I think he did play for United again, but only in sub appearances, never really got back. But that was where our season really started to fall off because we didn't have anybody who could play that role. And the players who were coming in to try and do it had different skill sets. And what he really wanted from that player was that ability to be calm on the ball, to pick it up from the defenders, and to be able to play those big switches into the space to get you in those positions to create the overload on either side. So it was really key that when we brought in Norwood, he was then the next step up in playing that role, that he's always available. He also has a job to do defensively. And I know obviously with Chowdhury in there, it may be that Chowdhury can cover the defensive abilities of about 4 men, because that's always been my experience of him. But I think what he will be looking for is the player who does that for United when it was Norwood was not just about picking those passes and being the real dictator of the team. They also had to be able to be the one who was the furthest back midfielder, who's going to win his tackles and can help out defensively as well. But that's probably the key position that we always identified, that with the right player there, everybody else could change because they were going to be the one who really drove the tempo and drove the team forward.
That's great to hear. And it was fascinating to hear what you were saying about Pedro, how you imagine him to join the attacks but out wide, creating those overloads. So I've kind of got him in midfield. But the other position I wanted to ask about was the 2 up front. You mentioned he always likes the 2 up front. What characteristics do those 2 have? Who were their peak? Who were the best players under Wilder at United at the time?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because United went through a real mix of strikers who played that role. For a long time, it was Billy Sharp and Leon Clark, which don't strike you as a natural 2, I would say, in terms of how they played together. But where we really found ourselves, and I think where Wilder would reflect on us being most successful and what he'd see as being the way of doing that, was David McGoldrick and Billy Sharp. So you've got that one striker who can link in and come in and play. So I think he would interchange a little bit. So if Duffy was going too far forwards, then McGoldrick could come back, sit in that 10 position, and he could be the one who starts to link play and play wide, create the overload if needed, while Duffy could stay forward. And then obviously you have your out-and-out striker, which for us was the Billy Sharp, who was, generally speaking, if he was fit, he was in the team. He really liked having that player there. He was the talisman for the club. And obviously they had a really good relationship. So I'll be honest, I'm not certain on Araujo and what his role is. I've not seen enough of him to know how he can play that. But I certainly think he'd really like working with Keenan Davis, because even though he's different to what United have got, he's the kind of player who was always on the lookout of trying to get at United.
I could see him fitting in quite well. But I'm going to just pop my head out here. Just put
Look at the screen. We've seen the team. We want to see your pretty face again, mate.
Wait, before we do that, there was the other graphic you sent to me, Charlie, Lou Orns. Should we get that one up screen?
Yeah.
So I'll just pop my face over it. So this is one of the other suggestions, guys, from a big Watford account, Lou Orns. Great. Hopefully he's watching at the minute. So he's gone with that same kind of formation. I think it's pretty similar, just 2 at the base, right, Charlie, with Loser and Chowdhury.
João Pedro more central as a 10.
Which Tom, which one out of the 2 would be more likely, would you say, from his time at Boro?
I mean, it could be either one, to be fair. I don't think we ever saw much of a full-on number 10 at Boro. I don't think we particularly had the players for it, though. So I can't really judge if João Pedro playing as the 10 would be the direction he goes for it, because even when we had Riley McGree, who is playing as kind of like a Roman number 10 now, he didn't play there. He was playing as kind of the left side of the midfield 3. So I would say possibly the closer to the first graphic, although I do think the second graphic would be probably great to watch. It's just with Wilder, let's say he's had these creative players, but never kind of used them in that way in what I've seen for Boro.
So one of the sorry, go on, Charlie.
I just wanted to ask Tom the question about the strikers as well, because I know Ollie said he doesn't know much about Arouge, and neither do we, to be honest. He hasn't had too many minutes, but I see him as the Billy Sharp, fox in the box, great movement, can get the goal. But Tom, what did the strikers look like at Boro? Was it a similar, maybe not a big man, little man, but more physical, one dropping deep and a poacher?
It wasn't particularly, no. We did have quite a physical striker when he took over in Uche Piazzu, but he didn't seem to like him very much. I mean, the Boro fans were all right with him. I think we all kind of enjoyed watching him play. I think there was one point where He held 4 men off the ball while he played it off to someone else. He was great to watch in that respect. But no, I thought on the whole McGoldrick Sharp dynamic that Ikpeazu would be one that would get used. But what is required from the strikers is a lot of running, and Ikpeazu couldn't last more than around 60 minutes a game. So I feel like that's where he probably fell out of favour with Wilder kind of very quickly. We had Andres Sparra and Duncan Watmore as our front two for quite a lot of the season. And what it was with them, Sparra had good movement, could always kind of get in behind the lines. And Watmore was good on the ball and could dribble at a defence as well. So it probably wasn't the same dynamic that Sheffield United had, but it seemed to work when we needed it to. The positioning between those two was fairly decent. And what I will say is a lot of the goals, what we'll remember from under Chris Wilder, were very similar. And it was play down the right-hand side, a lot of one-touch passing. Jones will get past his man, low cross into the box, and Watmore or Sparra would be in the 6-yard box ready to finish it. I think Ollie's probably got something to say about that, but it seemed like that was our most effective attacking method last season. But because we didn't have any balance on the other sides, we got found out quite quickly in the end of the season, and it was quite easy to defend against us. But I will say, even this season, when we started the season with Ryan Giles at left wing back and Isaiah Jones at right wing back, even then it didn't work particularly great. I mean, Giles is a great player, but he wasn't at that stage as good defensively as he's been coached to be now. And what I think we found was there was a lot of gaps down the left-hand side and down the right-hand side because of Jones is very similar, and it left the defence quite isolated as well.
So one of the big questions... Oh, sorry, go on, Ollie. Go on.
So I was just going to say, from my perspective, what you described there, Tom, is what I will call the goal. And that is the goal that we saw time and time and time again. Both, obviously, we had a little bit more balance, I think, from what you were saying there, where obviously with Jack O'Connell on the left, we had that side as well that could go. But that is very much the goal that Wilder is looking to try and score. And it's something that I've heard him do analysis on as well on Sky, I think it was, where he talked about how do you score goals against a 3 at the back system. And what he was saying is the way that you have to do it is you have to try and drag out the wide centre-back to come out to the player who's going to cross it. And you have to have 2 runners in through the middle so that the middle centre-back doesn't know who to mark. He will always inevitably go to the one nearest to the front post for any kind of quick pullback, which leaves you one in the middle free to then knock it in that space coming through. And that's obviously what he's trying to coach. And then as an analyst, I think it was on Sky, what he's then sort of picked out as part of his thing. So I think that's a really key part of the game. And really what you will see, if you're being successful with Wilder, you will see that goal a lot.
It's almost the blueprint for every goal we're going to see now. Charlie, I wanted to ask you about, I guess, the big question mark. We mentioned the lineup. The one man that Watford fans can't seem to fit in this team is Ismaila Sarr. Now, Luan's in the comment section says potentially Sarr right wing back. He's the one where I don't know where he fits. We must use Sarr's pace, best in the league. Robbie says, will be nice to see if Sarr can use his pace to good effect under Wilder. Where does he fit in that system? Is it going to have to be at right wing back?
Such a tough one, because I think it's such a big ask to get him as a right wing back. I think it's such a difficult position. The guys probably know more, but to teach someone who's just an attacking midfielder, he has played on the left under Slav. But the one thing about Ismaila Sarr, which would tempt me to always make him in the team, is that his quality in the final third. He's one of the few players that we've got that scores. We haven't got loads of people who chips in with goals. Does he play with Davies centrally? I've actually liked watching him off the left coming in centrally and running at people. But it's just, I think it's such a big ask to get him at right back. And I think obviously Ferreira's coming back injured and he seems kind of made for that role. But I can't see him as a right back. I think if he starts, he might be as one of the 2 up front. What do you think, Jacob?
I mean, I honestly couldn't tell you. The only thing I can think is if he changes it and goes to a 3 up front and maybe go for a 3-4-3 sort of thing and play with those and actually use the overlapping full wing backs with the wingers. Because also I remember him saying when he was speaking so fondly about Watford last season, that's how we played them against Middlesbrough at home, if you remember, Charlie, it was Pedro, Dennis, Sarr, if I remember correctly. And that three were just unbelievable. I remember him speaking really highly about it. That's the only way I think you can fit Sarr in this team at the minute. I just don't think I don't think you can play him at wing back, unfortunately. I don't think you can, especially against the better teams in this league. I think they'll just target him because they know defensively he won't be good enough. But even as a second striker under Kike, do you remember we tried him there and he looked a little bit out of place? So I'm really not sure. I mean, from your perspective, Ollie, did he ever tinker with the formation? We mentioned this kind of system that he plays, but did he ever experiment, or was it very regimented with the team he used to play?
Yeah, to be honest, towards the end of his time at United, obviously in the Premier League, we had a really, really, really bad season. But one of the criticisms that was labelled at him was that we didn't change. There was no fluidity to the United system. We had a way of playing and we only played that way. If we got figured out, if it wasn't working, we just changed the pieces. We never changed the puzzle. So we were always playing in that exact same routine. But what I would say is that before he came to United, as much as I think the principles were the same, he didn't start at United with this system. He was playing other ways from his time at Northampton or his time at Oxford, where he didn't always have 5 at the back. He would have 4 at the back, or he would look at different systems. So I think he can adapt. And I think he will do that if he sees the squad at him. I just think because he'd been at United so long, he was a little bit stubborn to not wanting to change it, because it was almost as if, look, I've done this, I can still do this, and almost trying to prove a point, I think, towards the end.
Really interesting stuff. We mentioned his style of play, guys. I just wanted to get a little bit of insight on his strengths and weaknesses, just as a manager in general. So we'll start with you, Tom. If you were to explain to someone, Chris Wilder, the manager, pros and cons, what would you go for?
Well, I think the pros we've spoken about a lot. You know, you've got that very structured formation. You've got that primary way of scoring, we'll say, which worked quite a lot initially for us. You know, at the start for us, where you know he had what was the stat earlier, 11 wins in 14 games. It was fantastic. We were pressing. We were playing some really good football. In fact, the best football I have seen, well, probably not this season now that Carrick's coming, but before the season started, we played a pre-season game against Marseille. And honestly, that was such an upgrade on what we were seeing last season. There was just lovely one-touch passing everywhere. And we made a French Champions League team look absolutely ordinary. I mean, bear in mind, it's a pre-season friendly. You can't really base a lot on it, but he had them so well drilled in that pre-season. So the early results of this season were not what we expected, kind of coming off the back of that. What I will say as a potential con is that also that system, and what I think Ollie was saying about the end of his reign at Sheffield United may have carried over to Boro, and that he was very kind of stubborn with that system. I think the way we changed it early on, if we were chasing a game, was to shot as many strikers on the pitch as possible. We sometimes ended up with about 4 or 5 up front by the end of the game, which seemed to be his go-to. But I feel like there were players in that team who were being asked to play roles that they weren't necessarily suited for. Not many, but I think the main one that a lot of Boro fans will remember from last season and have nightmares about is Joe Lumley. So I don't remember a lot of how the system played out at Sheffield United, but I do know that you guys had Dean Henderson, who seemed very comfortable with the ball at his feet and coming out of the box. It seemed like Joe Lumley was being asked to do that, and he wasn't good at it, I will be honest. The decision making wasn't there. He'd come chasing the ball out for about 25, 30 yards, try a slide tackle and either not fully get the ball or just miss it completely and then put us under danger again. And if I'm being honest, from what I saw from you guys at the Riverside earlier this season, I wouldn't trust Bachmann with it. I don't know if it's just because on the day Zach Steffen was in the other goal and he just looked supremely confident at playing out from the back. But it looked like Bachmann was very nervous with the ball at his feet quite a lot and the decision-making wasn't there. So I don't know. I could see a very similar case to Lumley in that situation.
Tom, you've made me sweat on this stream already, mate. I'm not going to lie. I have to admit, Backman, I don't know about you, Charlie, but shot stopping wise, top. But with his feet, he's really struggled this season. I mean, there's a lot of time. I mean, where do you start? But there's been a lot of times where he's tried to play it out to the fullbacks and he hasn't got it right, or there's been a loose touch, or he hasn't released at the right time. That doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. Whether he does that with him, I'm not sure, but I'm sure he'll try.
I will say it wasn't an instant thing. Lumley didn't seem to be doing that until probably around the second half of the season. So whether or not it's risked with so little games remaining, I don't know. But it did seem like it's like this is the way we're going to play. We need Lumley to play that way, and like I say, his decision making just wasn't there. So I would worry if it was Bachmann doing it.
The countdown to QPR. Ollie, pros and cons. Wilder, obviously, I'd imagine there's going to be more pros from a Sheffield United point of view. But just if you were going to reflect on his whole time at the club, maybe less so from the style of play, but what he just brought to the club, pros and cons wise, what would you go for?
The pros and cons wise for his time at United are, I think, obviously some of them are going to be relevant and some of them might not, because obviously there's a personal connection there, as in him being the United fan, having played for us before, the stories of him being a ball boy and things like that. But the way that and I think he did this early in his time at Boro, but do tell me if I'm wrong, Tom, because I could be. But the way that he got the squad to be so part of the fans, and I can't explain quite what I mean by that, but they were just felt like an extension of you. So every time you're at home, you thought, actually, I would not put any more effort than any single one of them is putting in for this club. And you got the feeling that they really cared and wanted to be a part of it. I think his man management of getting them involved in that journey very, very early on is one of his great strengths. And I think that was the thing that most came through at United, is how united the club actually became, because all the fans, all the players, all the staff seemed to be just telling one story. And it carried us so far, and it was massively felt when we couldn't be there to continue it with them. And so I think for me, that was probably the biggest pro of his time at United. If we take out all of the other sort of football success, what he did for the club in terms of the development of that relationship with the fans was really special to be a part of. And I think if he can get that at Watford and he can go to Vicarage Road and he can really create that connection, that's where you see the special stuff come. And that's where, as fans, it's what we go for. That's what we're really looking to gain on. I think in terms of sort of the cons of his time at United, I think it probably comes back just to that point of stubbornness in terms of the sort of system and the way of playing. When it didn't work, there wasn't really a flexibility. But I think the other side of it is more of a long-term concern than a short-term. I think it's that if he stays through the summer, how he works as a head coach will be really, really interesting to see, because that was a dynamic I didn't think I would ever see him work under. Now, obviously, he's gone away and he's reflected after his time at Boro, and maybe he's realised that that's the way that football's moving. And in a modern day coach, you've kind of got to accept that role. But for me, I've got minimal concerns for 14 games that he won't do a great job. I have more concerns if he's still there on the 1st of September next year.
Fascinating stuff. Honestly, it's really, it's completely changed my perspective of how I was viewing it, Charlie, because when we were speaking on the stream, when it immediately got announced, I was exactly the same as you, Ollie. I was like, I didn't see this coming at all. I think you only kind of have a list of managers that you would never see managing Watford. I think Chris Wilder probably would have been on there. And I don't mean that. I just never really could see him in a Watford tracksuit. To be fair, I said the same thing about Nigel Pearson, and then that he came to us. But Charlie, hearing the two lads talk about Chris and what he's done, how do you feel now as a Watford fan for the rest of the season? Because Ollie's pretty confident, and from what we've heard from Tom, that there can be an instant impact if executed.
Yeah, I think what Ollie just mentioned there about the connection with the fans and the man management, that's the thing that's excited me the most. As Watford fans, we've known for the last, 3-4 seasons now since we relegated first time from the Premier League. Then we had the COVID season where we couldn't see us get promoted, and I don't think we were amazing that season. We just had enough quality to get us over the line. Another terrible season in the Premier League, and this season, that connection with the fans and the team, it just hasn't been there like it has been in previous years. So I just hope Chris goes in. I think we've seen some nice little clips from the social team about his first day training wearing Copa Mondials. They love it, you, and do you know what I mean? Getting the fans look like they're enjoying the players look like they're enjoying training. I'm just trying to be as optimistic as possible, but we know what football's like. So
Honestly.
I'm just hoping we can go to QPR, see the players give a right good go. And I think if we win at QPR with like a good away end there, next game against Birmingham straight away, just try and get on a bit of a wave. We've got 3 easy games before them lot up the road. And I don't know, Ollie or even Tom, I've seen it before, but I don't know what Wilder's celebrations are like after a big win. But if I'm seeing that at Kenilworth Road,
yeah, it'll be big because I saw it at Hillsborough. Obviously, is where we saw the big one. He can celebrate.
Just actually, funnily enough, Tom, I don't know. Did he must have managed Middlesbrough in a derby? Did he?
Yeah, we had a 1-0 win against Sunderland earlier this season, but honestly, I can't remember what the celebrations were like. I think we were still in quite a nervy spell at that point, so I don't think there was particularly a lot of over celebration. What I would just add on to everything that's been said about the man management and getting the fans on board with the early part of the journey, I would urge anyone watching to go and watch our highlights against Man United in the FA Cup last season. I mean, firstly, because it was a great game, obviously, but after the game, you just see 10,000 Boro fans all singing and still stood there about 10 minutes after the whistle, and all the team is still there as well. It was really special. I was there. It was fantastic to be part of.
Amazing. Lads, what is just finally, we wanted to get your kind of predictions. I know Ollie's feeling pretty confident there's going to be an instant impact, but I'll cross over to you first, Tom. End of season predictions, not only for Boro, but then Wilder at Watford. So Boro first and then Wilder at Watford. What's your prediction?
I'm going to play it safe, considering we've got a Sheffield United fan on the panel as well, and say it's probably going to stay around the same. To be honest, all I want is for it to be interesting and kind of go down to the last game. Just give us something to play for. As nervous as it's going to make Ollie, obviously, but
nope, none of that. No.
But I'm pretty confident at this stage that Boro will make playoffs at the very least. Watford, I don't know, because I feel like there's quite a few teams who keep going in and out of the playoffs, and no one's really making it theirs at the moment. I mean, Blackburn seem to be in there out of absolutely nowhere at the moment, because I thought they were a lot further down than they were, just concentrating on ourselves and Sheffield United. But yeah, it's going to be close. I think if you can get the type of form that Wilder can bring in the early stages, then of course you guys can make it into the playoffs.
Ollie?
Yeah, I think for United, first of all, I don't know. I've made myself so nervous. I've got sweaty palms. But I think we will. No, I don't. I don't know. It don't matter. I don't know where United are going to finish. I don't know. I don't know where they're going to finish. I think Watford will make the playoffs. I agree with Jimmy Blaze Ramble, who's just come in. I think you will. I think what you'll probably see is an immediate impact. Charlie spoke there about sort of your first 3 or 4 games, where if you can have a real quick impact, I think that'll see you already close that gap. I think it's 4 points at the minute, and I think that'll quickly sort of be caught up if you can get on a bit of a run. I think you're going to make the playoffs. I think you'll finish 5th is where I'm going to put you in my sort of predictions.
You're sucking me in, mate. Oh, God. I'm not loving Watford. Honestly, I don't know whether it was you were the same, Charlie. I saw Chris Wilder in a Watford tracksuit in those Copa Mundials with João Pedro, and I was just, this club, mate, just sucks you back in again. Honestly.
Yeah, it really does. And obviously the club confirmed about Alan Neil and his team have joined him. He started off, I forgot to mention, in his first start after Halifax, he was Alan Neil's assistant at Bury. And then obviously he's been his trusty assistant, his right-hand man. So good to see him with him. If you've got
Alan Neil, just love the man. Just love him forever. Wilder and Neil together, just love him. That's all I can say. Just please love him.
Lads, it's been an absolute pleasure. Make sure you do go and check out Ollie on the Sheffield United Way. Tom on the Boro Breakdown, two of the best Championship fan channels and podcasts to get involved with. Charlie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Great insight from the two lads. I hope you enjoyed it at home. If you did, make sure you do leave a like. Check out the guys, as I mentioned. Links will be in the description below. And we'll see you in the next one. Back on the weekend, Charlie, for QPR.
Let's do it.
See you then. Up the audits.